And David, where again are you located?
I'm in Austin, Texas, in
Oh yeah,
the United States.
Austin, Texas.
Hmm.
That's what they say. Keep Austin weird, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm part of that.
You, you you're doing your
We're
best.
we're going to be one of the centers for the eclipse that's coming up.
Oh, you have an eclipse coming up?
Yeah, our population in our town is supposed to double on the first weekend in April.
Good, good.
Mhm.
I have my best friend lives in San Antonio, Texas.
Ah,
Yeah. So well, it's been for a long while since I've been there. For 10 years, I suppose. The
well,
last
have
summer.
them look me up sometime. That would be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I also met online. I guess we had was John James. He has Kai Kino. He has a massage school or osteopathy school in around in the Dallas area.
Uh-huh. I've heard of that.
Mm. Are you originally a Texan?
No, I'm originally from Chicago,
Oh,
so
Chicago.
northern Midwest, and I grew up there and did most of my early studies there, and moved here in 1984.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
So you're ready. You should be used to Texas by now, right?
Yeah, I am. I am, but I carry a lot of Chicago spirit with me, and I'm glad that I grew up there.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. I just have two kids, 10 and 11, and I
Mm.
introduced them to the movie The Blues Brothers.
Oh yeah. Well, blues was part of my heritage. I began playing the blues when I was 13, and I played blues for until I was about 25. That was one of my main things.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. I played with Otis Spann's piano player, Bunny Waters' piano player, Otis Spann. I was very good friends with a wonderful guitarist named Michael Bloomfield. So
Wow.
my earliest incarnation was as a musician,
Oh, this
blues,
man.
Indian music,
Oh,
and
wait,
atonal
what
classical
instrument do you
music.
play?
Hmm?
What instrument?
I play mostly guitar.
Oh,
I've
really?
studied sarod, an Indian instrument, a bit of piano, but guitar is my main love.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I play guitar too,
Hmm.
and
Maybe we can play together someday.
yeah, I think I always say that the best body workers are guitar players, but
Mhm.
that's nonsense, of course.
I'm
Hey,
sure you
that's
no, you're correct.
totally.
Mhm.
Do you know David Lasandek? I had an interview with him once too.
Yeah, yeah.
He
He
also is a
interviewed
guitar player.
us, both me and my co-author of my recent book. He interviewed us just a few months ago. Very nice
Ah,
fellow, and he also is a guitar player.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mentioned. Hey, and once this is the last thing, then we'll start. Otis Pen. So we had a library here in the Netherlands where they all had all kinds of obscure LPs. Is that the name? Long
Mm,
players.
yeah.
And I once had this album of Otis Pen.
Mm,
And I tried to look up anything after that, but I never found anything. But now you mention him, that's funny. I'm
yeah.
going to dig
I can
into it
send
again.
you. I have a story about playing with him.
Ah,
Uh,
send it.
it was a high point of my blues playing life. So I'll send that to you.
Hey, and all right, yeah, all right. Let's keep it professional. So, David, what is going to be the topic? Are we going to talk about zero balancing?
It's up to you. I'm happy to go anywhere. We can talk about anything that occurred to you with respect to my books. And yes, zero balancing definitely should be something we talk about.
Yeah. So I would say we talk about zero balancing, and then we'll find our way through talking about bones and anatomy and about making yeah contact, energy,
Mhm.
energetics, everything, right?
Yeah,
So I have I think a nice starting line, and I'm going to start right now. Is that okay, David?
please.
I'm just looking at my light. You have so much better light than I have. I have all this professional gear. Why am I so dark?
Mhm.
Maybe no. All right. David, thank you very much. Also, thank you for sending me all those books you sent me.
Mhm.
I've read them all, almost, almost. The deep massage I have to finish, but I've read them all, and I've read a lot about zero balance, zero
Mhm.
balancing. Yet, still, I think I don't have a clue. So my first question is, what
Mhm.
is zero balancing?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a common question. It's not a self-explanatory title, but basically, to talk about where it comes from, first of all, the man who founded it is a Dr. Fritz Smith, who was his father was an early chiropractor. He became an osteopath, studying with many different people, including some of the most famous cranial osteopaths. And then he went on, for various reasons, to go study with Ida Rolf at the Esalen Institute and became the first, he's an osteopath and MD. He became the first doctor certified as a Rolfer. And then he encountered J.R. Worsley, who was the most famous Western acupuncture teacher. And so Fritz studied with J.R. Worsley in England off and on for years and eventually getting his master's in acupuncture. And the other major thing about Fritz is that he he also studied and practiced with a guru named Swami Muktananda. And as a result of his contact with Muktananda, he had a lot of strong experiences of energy in his own body. So that whereas he had a lot of knowledge, he didn't have as much direct experience of that energy until he encountered Muktananda. And out of all those experiences, zero balancing was born.
Hmm.
And the main insight, I think, was that he became aware of the fact that is in our body various layers of anatomy, obviously, and that because we're alive, not only are those physical things, but there's energy flowing through them. There's energy in our skin, in our muscles, our organs, and in our bones. And Fritz, in his first talk that I heard in '86, he said, the energy in the skin or just under the skin is called Wei Qi in Chinese medicine. And it's kind of the protective energy, like insulatory or insulation. And that then the muscles and the organs maintain us. We move with them, we nourish ourselves through them, and we express ourselves through them as well. And that, however, the deepest layer of energy flowing through the body was through the densest, deepest tissue, which was bone. And until then, I had really never thought that much about bone. I actually felt in my body work, I'd studied Rolfing, I'd studied um, shiatsu, I'd studied orthopedic work, but I had felt like there was something I was missing. And when he talked about the bone and the energy flowing through it being the deepest aspect of the person, I was like, oh my God, there it is. I need to learn about this. I need to study with this man. And of course, I had then met him in Washington, D.C. at a American Massage Therapy Association convention and had a meal with him as well as talked at some length and then heard his talk.
Hmm.
So all of this gave rise to zero balancing. And the way in which it relates to balance and zero is number one, looking at it physically. You can think that when you lean forward, that's like a plus. When you lean backwards, that's a minus. When you're in the middle, then you're in the zero place, neither plus nor minus. And that, of course, relates then to the Rolfing model of grace, what I call graceful verticality that
Hmm.
they're looking for. So that's part of the zero. Then also there is the energetic aspect of zero, where sometimes you lean too far forward, for instance, into a relationship and you get off balance, or you lean too far back and you really don't have the ability to make good contact.
Hmm.
So there also is the idea of energetic contact that is balanced. balance, neither plus nor minus, at zero. So the idea of zero balancing comes from that idea of balance that arises from the deepest parts of us, namely this living skeletal system. Many people, when they think of bones, they think of dead things, and that's the opposite of what we ought to think. We ought to see that as the deepest form of life. And of course, it's the deepest structure through which we get our support. So it's a profound area to learn how to address as a person and as a therapist, certainly. And that's what zero balancing enables you to do, is to address the livingness of the bones through a very concrete method that is teachable and doesn't require any esoteric beliefs.
Okay, can you give us an example? How does it work? How do you touch the bones?
Well, yeah, it's quite simple. There's two main ways, of course. For instance, people hold oftentimes tension in their rib cage. I recall Wilhelm Reich, who said all neurosis begins as a restriction of breath. Well, in order to help free the breath, you need to make sure that the ribs have their full motility. So in zero balancing, the person's lying face up. We bring our hands underneath the rib cage and press in and feel for how movable are the ribs. Are there places which are thicker that you wouldn't expect and other places that are too thin, lacking in energy? So you go through the entire rib cage to feel what's going on in terms of movement and tissue texture. And then you go back and you place in zero balancing and in the deep massage that we teach, I call it, you place a fulcrum into that. Well,
Hmm.
fulcrum is the idea that the person balances around the touch that you're doing. It's another aspect of zero balancing. I'm at zero, but they are balancing around me. I'm just a catalyst pressing into, for instance, a rib. And while I press in, that person has a chance to relax from inside out. The deepest form of relaxation is relaxation on the level of the skeletal system. And so, uh, can you imagine then the touching of the ribs in that manner?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's also key joints in the body. For instance, one of the most important ones is the sacroiliac joint. And if you come underneath the pelvis and press up into the sacrum and hold it there so that the person feels the bone energy of the sacrum being contacted and a little bit greater freedom between the sacrum and the ilium of the pelvis, then that person starts to have a much more amplified feeling of energy flow through the whole body. Oftentimes people feel like they're two halves. There's a top half and a bottom half. Well, that's an experience that most people have. That gets quickly remedied by zero balancing because, for instance, the contact with the sacrum and treating it as the profound area that it is, because the sacrum, for instance, has five bones associated with it. It's the fusion of five bones. So if you think bone has energy, then certainly the sacrum, combining five vertebrae, has a tremendous amount of energy, as is recognized in the chakra model as the second chakra, and so on. So um, those are two ways that you can kind of see how the practicality of zero balancing proceeds. We focus in zero balancing on what are called foundation joints. These are joints which are designed for the transmission of energy rather than for locomotion. For instance, the sacroiliac joint has very little movement, but it's fundamental for our self support, as is the bones in the feet, for instance. 26 bones, very little movement between the bones, but they're critical. Even if a little imbalance is happening in the bones, it throws the entire body off. So in zero balancing, we work primarily with what we call foundation joints rather than locomotor joints. And that also gives us a window into a deeper aspect of the person.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah,
So there's energy in bones, in our bones, through our bones.
because they're alive.
Yeah. And you're not talking about meridians. It's another different another energy.
Yeah. Well, meridians are more associated with the soft tissues and organs, which is absolutely fine. And it can be addressed in a variety of manners through visceral manipulation, through acupuncture, through massage therapy, rolfing, etc. Um, in Chinese medicine, they regard the skeletal system as being the transmitter of what they call ancestral qi. So rather than being your personal doing energy, it's more allied with your being and with the source of your being, which doesn't arise from you in this model. It arises from a connection between heaven and earth and the energy that flows between the two gracefully and vertically.
Fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I remember as massage therapist, we kind of learn never to touch the bone, and that's even not good to touch the bone. But you started working a lot on the sacrum, and that people always really enjoyed it, and it felt very grounding and yeah,
Exactly.
coming home, Mish.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sacrum is a wonderful place. And then we
Yeah.
work with the joints, especially focusing on the feet, the hip joint, a variety. Hip joint is a locomotor joint, but there's so much energy transmitted through it that it makes sense to work with that. Then we work with all the intervertebral joints and through the ribs as levers to affect those joints. We work with the neck, with the suboccipital area of the neck,
And
the
this
whole
work, how does
shoulder.
that look? So you touch the bones, you touch the energy of the bones.
Yeah.
Um, and do you leave your hands there, or what do you do?
In respect to any particular place you're curious
Well,
about?
is there so zero balancing is making contact with the bones and the energy of the bones.
Mm-hmm.
And you gave us examples. And but how does you say we work? How does it work? Do you have
Yeah.
like a sequence or?
There's a very concrete protocol that one learns through zero balancing. There's a core one, core two, and then there's advanced courses. But in a 50-hour training, one learns core one and two. In a 25-hour training, one learns zero balancing level one. And so, yeah, there's a specific order, partly so that your mind doesn't have to be thinking as much while you're working, and you can concentrate on your own energy, making contact with that person. And so, when I make contact with a person, say we use the ribs as an example, when I make contact with the person through a place in the ribs that seems to call for a bit more attention, I'm going to press in and then I'm going to hold it. The idea of holding it is that the most important thing a client can do is to let go from the inside out. You can try to relax a person from outside in as much as you like. Relaxation is a function of their nervous system, or more broadly, their energy. And so by holding a place, you allow the person's awareness to travel from their awareness of your touch, and that kind of recedes, and they go deeper into themselves and start to relax on a visceral and skeletal level from the inside out. The best body work of whatever kind is going to help amplify the person's ability to let go of their own tension,
Mhm.
and that is letting go from inside out. Whereas many manipulative models purport to let go from outside in, where I'm going to press hard and I'm going to make you relax. You can't really make anybody relax.
No, no. Oh wow. And yeah, yeah, like you cannot command somebody to relax, like
Yeah, say relax. Well,
relax.
it does the opposite.
And
Yeah,
I guess that's the same actually for the body, right? If you push really hard.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's like a conversation then, where if I am speaking to the body, I need to let the body speak back, and that means I need to stop doing. So in zero balancing, once you place the fulcrum, you stop doing, you kind of go into a meditative state while they are given the opportunity and the time to let go from inside out. And that's critical. Zero balancing integrates pausing as a fundamental part of what's healing.
Mm. Hey, and the quality of the attention or the touch is also very important in this work, right?
Absolutely. We call in deep massage, which is the term I use for my soft tissue work, and in zero balancing, we teach to work at what's called interface. So in interface, I imagine that my energy and structure is coming to meet their energy and structure. I am not imagining that my energy is pouring into them or that theirs is pouring into me. It's more important when we work in energy and structure to maintain very clear boundaries.
Mhm.
And this is the way we do it. So I really visualize that the center of my awareness is right there where I'm touching the person, or if I'm doing a engagement of a joint where I'm building some opening and holding an opening in, for instance, the hip joint, excuse me. So that idea of working at interface, I love the philosopher Martin Buber. He said, it is not the educational intention which is fruitful, it is the meeting which is educationally fruitful. So I want to meet that other person where they're at, not with my agenda, but with a clear, kind, and strong attention
Mm.
that allows them to feel really well met. And once a person feels really well met, then they have the opportunity to feel very safe. And when you feel very safe, different things can happen in your body mind.
Yeah. It reminds me of focusing.
Yeah, but Gendlin's work.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
the physical way of focusing, right?
That's
No, it's
right.
in
It's
the
definitely focusing, and I know that Fritz and his wife Amina had both uh, taken Gendlin's ideas into account among many many things in terms of what they how they develop things.
yeah. Hey, you wrote the biography of Fritz
Hmm.
Smith. Smith, right?
Yeah,
It was a great book to read. A lot of love. I've read between the lines.
nice.
Um, the work zero balancing. It sounds also a little bit like osteopathy, or not?
Well, in a certain sense, yes. Whereas osteopathy has become a much wider and somewhat more medicalized field than it was originally. Um, but Andrew Taylor's still the founder of osteopathy. He identified fascia as the organ of the soul, and of course he related a bone. There's a beautiful picture of him looking at the femur, and it's almost like the femur is looking back at him. uh, so osteopathy recognized the inherent intelligence, innate intelligence in bone, as well as in the other aspects of the body. However, Fritz is unique in his fulcrum model, whereby he pauses and we pause while we're making contact with bone, whereas we're not working with realigning things. We're
Mm.
not working with sudden moves, as may characterize some osteopathic manipulation. And of course, that derives a little bit from cranial sacral work in that where there's a lot of listening going on while you're holding a point or a traction.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, and what do you use it for? When do you give zero balancing or?
That's like saying, well, what good is food for? When do you do it? Is it a good idea to do that food thing we talk about? But in any case, uh, zero balancing is great for a person to feel centered. For a person, a lot of times they'll come in and say, I've been so scattered, I don't feel like I've been centered. Well, it's the most radically centering thing you can do is bring the person back into their core self. When we say, I just feel it in my bones, we assume that that's more than a figure of speech, that the person needs to contact the deepest part of themselves in order to feel whole, in order to feel balanced. So there's that aspect. There's also the aspect of that zero balancing is a verticalizing therapy through paying attention to these foundation joints. So anything that gets compromised on that level gets remedied or certainly helped by the attention that zero balancing pays to these foundation joints. Again, uniquely because we're not focused on locomotor joints.
Hmm.
Um, and does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can understand from your point of view that it's like food, but
Yeah, why do people want it? For
it's
centering, for psychological balance, for physical balance, for problems that have not yielded to other forms of body work, certainly.
yeah.
If a person's had a lot of soft tissue work, still their skeletal system may never have been touched. As you say, massage therapists, for instance, are not trained to think about the skeleton or even to touch them with consciousness.
Hmm.
So any problem that has not yielded to any other form of body work is really worth doing, because here is the skeletal system which nobody's paid attention to, and yet it's the core of ourselves. So you're going to want that to remedy, pain and tension that hasn't gone away. You're going to want it for postural reasons. You're going to want it for emotional reasons and for spirit, because another thing that characterizes the bone is it's the deepest part of us. So core beliefs, um, core experience of yourself, it's held there. Whereas personality is manifest oftentimes through organs and muscles. The core self, almost you might say spirit, is manifest through bones. Bones are not agitatable. Bones aren't worried. Bones aren't expressing our problems. Bones are just there. They're saying, wherever you can be as crazy as you want, I'm just here. I'm going to support you. I am not full of complication, and neither are you. So go to the place where there's more peace inside of you. And
Like
that is the
bones,
bone
bo
layer.
it's like bones are the most mindful places of our body, right?
That's right. They're meditating while you're going nuts, with current events and whatever. The bones are going, I'm just here. I do what I do. I hold the deepest energy inside of you. I let it be transmitted and to flow through the more superficial layers. So it's a very articulate and a beautiful place
Yeah,
to
well,
to look at and to deal with and to contact.
you yeah, your love of bones is also is readable in the book you wrote with your colleague. It's what's it called? The Palace
Of
of
the
Memory,
memory palace of bones,
the Memory Palace of Bones.
exploring embodiment through the skeletal system. Yeah,
It's almost
that's
like
my latest book. Hmm.
it's like poetry to the bones. I have a lot of people in classes who start learning massage and they hate anatomy, and
Yeah,
here you are with this poetry about every bone we have in our body, right?
that's right. That's right. You anybody who any good anatomy teacher, really good anatomy teacher, will bring it to life. As we say, well, at the meeting, you have to meet life in the bones, meet life in the muscles, see it as expressive of your whole self, see it as an emanation of character. And that's Buber's essay, The Education of Character, has influenced me tremendously, in which he says that business about it's the meeting, not the intention. So I want to be there as a person, really invested in meeting this person who's seeing me. And
Mhm.
that in itself, you know, I think Jenlin said this. They did a study of different forms of therapy to determine which had the most positive therapeutic outcomes. And what they discovered was it didn't matter what modality was practiced, what mattered was the quality of the therapeutic relationship. And here we are as therapists learning how, through zero balancing and other modalities, how to enhance the quality of our therapeutic relationship. That is the best predictor of a therapeutic outcome.
Mm.
And that's exciting to realize, stepping beyond the marketing of everything and just saying, what enhances your therapeutic relationship.
Wow. And I never thought of the bones, and maybe because also we have this skeleton in our class, and it's plastic,
Mm-hmm.
it's bones, it's we always yeah, I think of it as the dead material, right? It's like
Totally.
branches. That-
I relate a story that I worked on a radiologist who is a doctor who had seen, all that you can imagine with X-rays and MRAs and CAT scans and so on. And I asked him, I said, "What's the most amazing thing you've ever seen?" And he thought about it. He said, the most amazing thing was the first time I saw a spinal cord inside a living person. And, I've seen spinal cords in cadavers. They look like kind of dehydrated jellyfish. And so I said, why is that? He said, it looks like it's dancing to the Rolling Stones. And I was like, oh my God, I never have pictured that. He said, because the spinal cord is in fluid, and when the electricity passes through the nerves, they undulate as wires in your house would if they weren't tacked down, or as lightning, or as anything flows. And so he said, yeah, it was the spinal cord inside the living human. It looks like it's dancing to the Rolling Stones. Well, that completely transformed my idea of what's going on inside the body, because like so many people who'd studied anatomy, I'd seen only two-dimensional things, or even in cadavers, I hadn't seen the movement that happens inside the person. And there's vast movement going on inside all of us all the time. We're mostly water. So there's mostly currents going on in us. That's what we are, is mostly currents. And of course, with these currents, they are also flowing around bone. And then the deepest, strongest energy currents are flowing through the bone itself.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Hey, and you also give classes, teaches courses in zero balancing.
Yeah.
What kind of people is it? All body workers or massage therapists who attend these classes?
Well, usually it's going to be massage therapists, nurses, physical therapists, physiotherapists, and certainly that's with obvious applications. One interesting thing is, because it's such a existential therapy, that Fritz decided long ago that if anybody wants to just study zero balancing for the first few levels, they just have to be interested. It could be a dancer, it could be a musician, it could be psychotherapists, certainly. So, pretty much anybody who seems genuinely interested is free to study basic zero balancing. Beyond that, one needs to be a health professional in order to get certified, and that takes a bit more training. But I would say 90% of the people in my classes are health professionals already, probably more massage therapists than anything else, but also osteopaths, chiropractors, nurses, paramedics, etc.
Mhm. All right. Hey, and I like the idea of the layers of energy. I never thought
Mm-hmm.
about that. I was thinking
Yeah,
lines or in areas like the chakras, but never thought of it in 3D. That the deeper you get into a body or a body part, the deeper the energy changes.
yeah. There's energy characteristics for sure.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah,
And can you once more explain the concept of a fulcrum?
sure. Well, there is I don't know what you call them in your country, but we call them teeter totters or seesaw, where you have a child on one end and on the other, and you have something in the middle that doesn't move. Uh, the American Heritage Dictionary defines a fulcrum as a uh, point around which something comes into balance. They even say a point around which vital powers are exercised, which is a provocative statement. So, in order for me to encourage movement and greater depth of experience in the client, I need to stop moving. As long as I move, some part of their nervous system is going to be tracking my movement. But the minute I stop, they have the chance to go deeper in. And so in a fulcrum, you go after you, well, there's certain steps. You want to take out the looseness in the body, you want to take up the slack, you want to hold some vectors so that the person feels contact in a way that's very clear, for instance, at the level of bone, so that they're not unclear about, well, am I in soft tissue? Where am I? I'm making contact with the bone. You might say also with the periosteum, which is
Hmm.
the fascia, lying on the bone. And so it turns into a fulcrum by me then not doing anything. So it's a not doing form of therapy. It's almost Zen in that way, where once I make the good contact, I just hold that. I hold it for a period of time, which may be anywhere from 3 to 5 or maximum maybe 10 seconds. I hold it and allow them to go deeper and deeper into the experience of relaxing through their nervous system, or if you want, through their energy as being a wider term. But that time in which you allow them to just rest into it, that's when the work is being done
Yeah.
by them. And in zero balancing, we also teach what we call working signs, which is, well, how long do you know to hold a given point or a fulcrum attraction? One of the best ways to know is to have a knowledge of different signs that show that the person is responding.
Mhm.
You can see the eyes. We say the eyes are the window to the soul. So we look to the eyes, we look to the face and different facial expressions as we see, for instance, a jaw relax or a worry line disappear. And then we look very much at the breath, because whereas the eyes, we say, are the window to the soul, the breath is the window to the spirit. It's right there in the word, respiration, spiritus, etc. So we're looking for changes in the breath as an indication that the person is doing their own work from the inside out. Very commonly, the mostly you'll see that when they let go, you see a sigh. The sigh is always a sign of energetic relaxation, and it's a sure bet that they're now relaxing, not just on the level of their mind, but on an organismic level. You know, the deepest tension in us um, forms early when we're babies, when we don't think about the difficulties we're experiencing. We react organismically to tension in the field. And using touch is the best way to work with that, because that works more directly with the body and the body embodied experience. You can I'm not to put down verbal therapy, but verbal therapy only goes so far because of the engagement of the left brain, whereas a direct engagement of the body mind through breath, through fulcrums, through so on, that's the way to talk to the deepest part of the person, because touch is the first sense to develop in the embryo, and it's
Mm.
the last sense to go when we die. So
Yeah.
touch is the fundamental language that we first are relating to the world with. And that makes touch even more powerful than sometimes we think.
Yeah.
Even as therapists, sometimes people don't realize the profundity of the language of touch to communicate things that can only be communicated that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, David, you've been a therapist the whole lifetime. What makes a good therapist?
Well, like you say, therapeutic relationship, uh, and what makes that trust, enthusiasm. I've always liked the word enthusiasm because it comes from theo, God, and en. So it means in God. Uh, I want to be enthusiastic. As a teacher, I like to see my students' eyes light up, more than their eyes. Uh, so I think enthusiasm is an enormous thing. Honesty is enormous. Again, back to Buber's, the meeting. What am I meeting the person with? What am I meeting my students with? Am I meeting them with my whole self? Am I meeting them with a sense of respect, humility, a sense of humor, um, articulateness? And also, I've taught a seminar called Teaching with the Enlightened Body, where we realize that you don't just teach with your mind. You teach with what you're doing with your legs, how you're moving. You teach with each chakra, in essence. You got to teach with your heart for sure. You teach with your voice. It's a vocal art, it's a performing art to teach. And as well as being a good therapist, I have to use every bit of myself, um, as much as I can. So those are some of the aspects I think that make for a good therapist. And it's not that different than being a good teacher because, as Rolfers say, we're not engaged in manipulation. We're doing somatic education. Somatic education is, zero balancing obviously is somatic education on the level of the deepest part of us.
Wow, fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
David, thank you. Did I forgot to ask a vital question or a good question? Is there something you want to mention?
Well, I'll mention one thing is that my mentor, Dr. Fritz Smith, is going to be 92 in May, and we're going to be visiting him in California. And so we're real happy that he's still around and grateful to have had a really kind and humble teacher for a long time now. So that's one thing I'm happy about. Um, I will say that in addition to my books, I've been getting very involved in writing poetry. And so, as you talked about the poetic aspect of the uh, Memory
Sounds-
Palace of Bones book, I'm feeling now that I've retired from running my school, so I have other people running our school. It's freed me to expand my writing capacities. I've written 5 books now, but my next book's probably going to be poetry. And then the book after that will be our publishers asked us to do a workbook for the Memory Palace. So we're going to do a book that is just practical exercises for the person who wants to make it more of a practice and explore it on their own relationship to their bones and to their own depths to this idea of the memory palace. Memory palace, by the way, is a beautiful concept. It arose as a form of technique to memorize things because before there was a lot of written availability, somebody's learning was largely a function of what they could remember and of other ideas that other people had to remember them. And so they developed the idea of creating an internal um, vision of a palace inside you, which you decorated with things that you wanted to remember.
Hmm.
And so it was a technique. And there's a beautiful book called The Art of Memory by Francis Yates that goes into that. But the Memory Palace has been something that's been a kind of non esoteric, but not esoteric technique that's been used. And of course, our use of that word in the title of the book is to say that the internal aspect of you, really every aspect of your anatomy, but certainly the bones, it's this internal architecture which holds memories that are archetypal because the femur has developed through eons of evolution. And in some ways, if you just listen to these bones, they have an age old story to tell you, not only the history of the person's treatment, but of how did the tibia develop? How did the hands learn how to use the thumbs? So the miraculous evolution of the body is something that's still present within us. And that's what we can learn through entering the body as a memory palace. And so we're fascinated with that
Yeah,
way of approaching it.
yeah, it is fascinating, and
Mhm.
it's always also fascinating to look at other species, other mammals, and see so much similarities in their bones, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, you mentioned this picture of Andrew Taylor Still
Yeah.
looking at the bone. Which bone was it? Tibia,
He's looking at the femur.
the femur. Oh,
Yeah.
what did he see?
Well, I think he's seeing kind of the essence of life that still was involved in the Civil War. You saw many, many injuries of soldiers, and of course, many injuries that were affecting a person on the level of the bone or down to the bone. So I think he really felt the bone as a reservoir for life, just as in another context, the poet Walt Whitman experienced this, and it expresses in many ways in his book great book of poetry, The Leaves of Grass. So I think Still was thinking that the femur is his equal and that he's looking at it as much to say, what do you have to tell me? And maybe even more so than what he has to tell the bone. So he's looking for a story. Many stories are being told within that memory palace.
David, it was a great honor to talk to you and your knowledge, to listen to your knowledge about bones, but also your love about bones. And I'm saying bones, but of course you don't love bones, you love life and human, mankind. Uh,
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
my pleasure. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk with you.
I'll stop recording now and we'll chat a little more, okay?